how many of you here use Buffer?
Yeah.
All right. How many of you are part of the Buffer community? Trick question? All right. So, I mean, first, just to get started, I want to acknowledge you. What I just said, I obviously hype up a lot of our speakers, but I want to genuinely say that, like, the work that you guys are doing and how you're creating your values and how you're building your business is, like, really set an example for us at CMX. And I really think what you're doing is defining how companies should be built. So first, just thank you for everything you're doing.
Yeah, thanks so much. It's been amazing to see your journey in the last few years, and yeah, especially recently chatting about your values and things, because I think that's one of the things that we decided, oh, let's do this early. We did it when we were around 10 people. It's amazing that you're doing that earlier as well. So yeah, it's definitely a two-way thing here. So
yeah, I think that's the value in what you're doing, is that now companies that can see what you guys have done and use you as an example can start earlier thinking about this stuff. And so let's dig right in. So how do you define the Buffer community? Right, you have lots of different users. You have a Twitter chat. I know you do events. You have a community team that's growing now. So, like, who is the Buffer community?
Yeah, it's a great one. Yeah, it's really interesting to think about. I think that I see it in terms of, like, maybe different layers. I feel like the Buffer community, for me, I define it very broadly. I think it's basically, for me, it is anyone that we kind of touch or come in contact with at all, just through the process of growing a company and doing what we're doing. So that's all the way from the obvious ones are users and customers, but all the way to anyone that reads any of the blogs, anyone that is in any of our kind of dedicated communities around the product. We have like beta communities around the product, but also the team is definitely part of the community. We also do quite a lot that includes the team members' significant others and families in terms of coming along to the retreats that we do twice a year and things like that.
You actually have a Slack group for the family members of the people on your team, right?
Yeah, that's right. We have a Slack group for team members, significant others, and it's actually a private group. So my girlfriend's in the group, but I don't really know what's going on, and I don't want to kind of breach that trust there.
Is that like a big step for you? Like, other people have to add it to Facebook, you have to add her to the Slack
group?
It
was like how to announce it. It's like,
that's a big step.
Yeah, that's right.
It's easier to change your relationship status than remove someone from Slack, huh?
Yeah. That'll be tough.
All right, I won't put you on the spot anymore. Is she here?
Yeah, she's over there. I can see her.
I didn't mean any of that. You're good. So you have all these different members of the community, right? You have customers, you have your team members, you have team members, family members, all that kind of stuff. How is that all one community? Do you have like a tighter knit core group, and then there are kind of different experiences? Do you really think of it all as one community, or is it lots of different communities?
I think it's tough. I think I see it as one community, but I think there are sub-communities within that, and I think that we definitely just naturally or deliberately, and I think that's one of the interesting things in terms of thinking about community and community building, is that I think we now have a community team within the company, but even long before that, we've been very community focused. So I feel that it's something that is going on whether you choose to be deliberate about it or not. But yeah, in terms of the whole Buffer community, I see it as different pockets of community. There's definitely right now different subsets of community that we are more focused on than others. Yeah. And I think some of that is accidental and just the way it's happened, and some of it is like a deliberate choice.
Right. So, hey there, you got a shout out. Only 2 speakers have gotten that shout out. You're very lucky.
That's awesome.
So that's interesting, right? So you've told me before, right? Your entire company is community driven. Now your community team is growing really quickly, right?
Yeah.
It started out pretty small. There she is.
Yeah. Bonnie and Abiel.
Bonnie Hugs. It's the best community manager name in the world, seriously.
Great hugs too.
Yeah. So what does the community team actually focus on, and how is that unique from what the company is focused on in terms of community?
Yeah, I think it's been one of those things where even since the really early days, even when it was just me and my co-founder Leo, we tried to do a few things that were kind of deliberate community effort. For example, we had a ritual for a while where on Friday afternoons we would, write 3 thank you cards each to randomly picked buffer customers. And these are things we tried to do, but we struggled to, keep the consistency going. And so the idea now for us of having an actual community team is that we can really be deliberate about these things. We can track our progress, and we can just really make sure that we're putting in that effort that we want to put in. And all the ideas, I've had, and I think everyone in the whole company has had different ideas and dreams and things that we think of, like, it would be really cool if we could do this with the community. And so it's kind of just taking it much more deliberate. And there's many different things we're doing, from buffer chat which is kind of our Twitter chat that we have every week. And then there's also the product beta communities. There's a Slack community we have. Then there's also kind of local communities. We're also a fully distributed team. So we're over 90 people now, spread all across the world, 5 different continents, 60 different cities. So now I kind of see that, how can we impact the local community in all these places that we happen to be as well as a company.
Yeah, that's massive. So you guys, you have a pretty simple product. It's social media management tool. You schedule all your tweets. You have a few other products you guys offer now. They're all really good products. But what is it, do you think it was? Was it the product, or was it your values around transparency and culture that really made people so excited to be a part of this community and made it grow so quickly?
I think it's intertwined, but I'd say it's probably more on the side of the values and the culture focus that we've had. I find it really amazing that if I happen to meet someone that knows about Buffer, it's like almost as likely that they'll know about Buffer due to the culture and some of the things we do around that, and being a distributed team, the transparency efforts and things like that. So the fact that people sometimes know about that and don't even know what the product is pretty mind-blowing for me. So I feel like it's very much intertwined. I think that we've always had that focus. Before we put the values into words, it was already natural philosophies and principles that me and my co-founder had. I'd say when we started, we were personally, I had a startup before Buffer that didn't work out, and one of the key reasons I think it didn't work out is that I didn't involve the community enough when I was working on that product. And so ever since the beginning of Buffer, it's been essential that the community has been involved. We wouldn't be where we are at all without that.
So talk to us about your values and what's the approach that you guys took to really hone in on those values?
Yeah, so we put the values into words when we were about 10 people, as I mentioned, and we saw it as something that we wanted to also be deliberate about in the same way as having a community team is being deliberate about community. So we felt like we have these values and principles that we live by, and we want to articulate them. We want to be much more focused around those. So now it's part of our hiring process. It's part of how we approach community as well. It really is part of everything. The interesting thing recently I've been thinking about, especially in the run-up to this event, is how do those values and the culture we have as a company, how does that extend to the community? That's really fascinating to me, because even thinking about the people in the team, and then that next kind of layer of people's significant others and people that they have intimate relationships with, is really interesting, because obviously when we hire, we can be really focused on culture fit for people in the team, but then that doesn't necessarily mean that people they know that layer just outside are also a culture fit from that kind of way that we define it. So
do you expect the members of your community to hold themselves to the same values that you have internally?
No, I don't think we can, and I think the culture we've chosen to live by and the values we have are purely the values that we feel that we want to run by as a company. And it's always been one of those things where we said, this is not our way is the right way and other ways are not the right way. It's just we've decided that we want to live and run things this way, and that we believe that having alignment around that has many, many benefits. And so, but I think it's we want to we try and be really open-minded and see these other approaches are really great as well. And so that's where I think, as we think about this whole community, there's naturally many different cultures going on. Each community has its own culture, and that's really amazing to see as well. And I think we can learn a lot from what's going on there as well.
Yeah. So you guys are actually going through a process right now, you were telling me, of maybe changing some of your values. So why don't you tell us a little bit about that, and then how do you communicate that out to people? So if you as the executive team are deciding these are our values, but you already have a team that have been bought into previous values, you have a community that's bought into it, how do you get people on board with these new kinds of values and approach?
Yeah, it's really interesting. I think I kind of think about it as, there's two ways you could approach it. It could be very much like executive team, top down, like, oh, we want to change this, and then we make the change to the values, and then we try and have that flow down. I think that's not how it works. Even when we established the values, it was very much like we already have a strong culture, and we want to just put words around it. So I think that what's going on right now is very much along those lines, where we're recognizing an adjustment in the culture that is not fully represented by the wording of the values that we have, and we're making that change. So specifically what it is that we have, one of our values is positivity and happiness. And we really believe that, if, as an example, we got hacked a few years ago. It was a really, really tough situation to go through. Essentially, hackers obtained the key to Facebook and Twitter for all of our users and started posting spam on their behalf. So
I remember that.
Yeah, I was just, having a relaxed Saturday morning in a coffee shop, and suddenly looked at Facebook, and it's all spam, and same on Twitter, and I was like, oh, you see this from time to time, you're like, oh, sucks for that person. And then I look more closely, and it's via buffer, and I was like, shit. And then it's just this scramble to solve that. And these are really tough situations, but one of the beliefs we've always had is that if as a team we can approach that with this idea of positivity, instead of really being annoyed in that moment, complaining and things about the situation, we can say, it's amazing to be in this situation. The fact that I'd see so many people on Facebook where that spam was going out, I felt really, really bad that was happening, but at the same time, it's amazing that many people are even finding value from this product, and then that, people get in touch with us on Twitter and say, what's going on. It shows that many people care. So we believe that, we want to operate with that positivity, but we have found that at times it's accidentally kind of stifled radical candor or honesty, and really voicing some concern you might have about something we're doing, because it's kind of this idea of you've got to be positive about everything. And so we've kind of realized that maybe the wording of that value is something that is impacting that, but it's really, we're not changing the wording, right now. We're not for a long time. We're trying to make sure that, we start to adjust our actions as an executive team, and we start to have these conversations. We've started having these conversations in the team of maybe this is triggering this. It's creating this kind of artificial harmony rather than really having, effective debates. And so then I think things are starting to change. And then as a result, a few months from now, it'll just be oh, it's a no-brainer. We need to change the wording now to reflect the reality.
Do you think that, on the topic of transparency and candor, do you think that every business should be radically transparent?
I think it's hard to. I would feel like I'm not in a position to say, every business should be radically transparent. I think there's so many, different industries and different situations where it might not make sense, even for us. It's interesting to think about a lot of SaaS companies are very much more enterprise focused, and when we're lucky we have over 50,000 customers all paying small amounts. Because of that, it becomes this aggregated thing. We can be really transparent about, the revenue we make and things like these are things that we share. But if you're an enterprise, company with only 20 customers, even if you have the same revenues, it might be hard to be transparent about that, because it might, say, trigger, indicating something about those companies and things like that. So, and even when we've worked with certain vendors, we've had situations where we have to sign something to say we're not going to share what we're paying.
Does everybody make you sign an NDA?
When they know enough, yeah. But I mean, we have pushed back on that sometimes, and we'll try our best to live by our values. But we also recognize that these are our values. Other people have different values, and we want to respect that as well. So I really believe that it's case by case basis. But I would say that there's definitely a case for pushing yourself more to question. I think there's a lot of things that are just the status quo that's like, these things are not shared, salary information, all these things are just generally not shared. And I think in a lot of cases, there's massive benefits to much more openness and transparency around things. So
Yeah.
I feel like I'm not in a position to say it should always be the case, but I do feel like we should really thoroughly think through and then decide to not be transparent.
Yeah, I mean, I think transparency is really critical to some extent for community because that's how you're building that trust and creating that window into what's happening.
Yeah, and for us, I think it's very powerful. It's kind of, I find it exciting that, if you think about everyone in the team being a community, being part of our community efforts. The fact that we have that level of transparency means that I feel, 100%. And even for myself, I don't have to have that, dialogue in my head of that question of like, can I share this? Can I not? If you're
You default to it.
if you're in an event like this, Bonnie and Ariel can just share anything at all that's going on. Any numbers someone asks, like, oh, how much are you, generating with this effort, or like, how do you do this? And they can just share, completely openly. I think that's really powerful for community efforts.
Yeah.
And I do think that transparency kind of breeds this trust because people feel like, oh wow, like you're being very open, vulnerable, you're putting things out there, and I think that actually is very powerful for building community as well.
How many of you out there have like a clearly defined set of values for your company or your community?
Oh, that's awesome.
Yeah. How many of you like kind of know what your values are, but they're not very well defined? How many of you have no values? Nobody? I wonder what everyone who didn't raise their hand has. So we're out of time, but what's the one piece of advice you have for people who are at companies who don't have clearly defined values? How should they be thinking about defining those values?
If you are, a leader of that team, I would really think about trying to define those values. I think it's like massively powerful to put them into words. If you're a team member and you feel like maybe you don't have that, ability to make that change, then I would just try and start talking to the people that you're in touch with and see if people are open to that. Start having those conversations. So yeah, I think there's definitely a lot of value in like pushing for that.
Cool. Yeah. Awesome. Well, thank you so much, Joel.
Cool. Thanks so much.